What's up, everybody? It's Tyler. Today I am showing you how to make a power station out of an e-bike battery, and this battery is out of a Sur Ron Light BX. It's a 60 volt 40 amp hour battery, which is a high voltage and a high capacity battery. So something that could be very useful and provide a lot of power. A lot of people might have e-bikes that they don't really ride so much. They might not ride them in the winter. Even just the little bikes with the 48 volt battery packs, those are useful. And basically it's the same process as it would be for this to make a power station out of. So today I'm going to show you how to harness this really actually nice battery that you have around the house in order to make a power station. That way it might save you $1,000 of buying a power station, when really all you need to do is get an inverter to hook this up to the battery and you'll have power. So let's get to it. If you're like me, you have a Sur Ron Light BX and you don't really ride it a ton in the winter. So you have this battery just sitting in your basement, not really doing anything. Recently, we had a storm. We had 3 feet of snow. It would have been really useful to have a good power station with a lot of capacity in the case that you lost power. So something like this, once you get it set up with this harness, all you'd have to do is plug it in and you'd have a pretty good high capacity power station. The equivalent power station for this probably costs around $600 to maybe $1,000. It's definitely a good setup. Once you get it set up, you spend a little bit of labor to get it running, because basically all a power station is a battery, an inverter, and some way to charge it and track it. So today we're gonna be harnessing the Sur Ron Light B battery in order to turn this thing into a power station. This is gonna be a really straightforward one. I'm not even gonna put it into a container or anything. I'm just gonna build it and kind of show a proof of concept. So what I have obviously first is the actual battery itself, which is currently fully charged. This is a battery out of a Sur Ron Light BX. It's 60 volts and 40 amp hours. It's important that you look up the voltage of your battery, because that's going to depend on the type of inverter that you need. If you have one of the smaller Light Bs, those are a 48 volt battery. A lot of e-bikes use 48 volt batteries. The higher ends can use 72 volts, but depending on the voltage of your battery is the voltage of your inverter you need. So I got a 60 volt inverter, which is actually a harder kind of inverter to find. It's not super common to have a 60 volt inverter. If you have a 48 volt e-bike, it's going to be much easier for you to find a good, reasonably priced inverter for that. I also have this, which is a wiring harness that will plug into my actual battery in order to use the power and get it to the actual inverter. So I'm going to have to wire this up, run the power from the battery to the inverter. I also have this thing, which is called a shunt, and this is what actually measures how much power is moving to and from your battery. This will go on the ground circuit from the battery to the inverter. I bought this one. This one's super cheap. This one was like $12 on Amazon, which I realized was kind of a dumb idea, because now I'm gonna have to make a harness from scratch and that'll take a little bit of extra time. But they sell much nicer ones of these that are like 50 bucks. Renogy sells a nice one that I have in my camper, but for this purposes, I just wanted to buy the cheapest one possible to make sure this was super budget friendly. So it's going to take a little extra time for me to wire this up, but this is a shunt that I'm going to be using in this video. Another important thing is an actual circuit breaker. I looked up the specs for the Sur Ron Light B circuit breaker and bought the same one, so that this will go to protect it from over discharging, anything like that. That way, if this circuit pulls more power than this battery is capable of pulling, this will trip and it'll shut down the circuit, keep my battery safe, because these batteries are not cheap. I don't want to be ruining it. I also have some tools. I have a multimeter. This is just the free one that they used to give you at Harbor Freight sometimes. I have a couple of wires I'm going to use. Most of the wire I'm going to be using for the main circuit is going to be off of this harness, so that's fine. This inverter came with these wires, which I'm not sure are thick enough, so we're going to put those to the side and not use them unless we have to, but I have better wires lying around. I have this thing, which is to crimp lugs on the end of a wire, and I have these, which are some lugs and heat shrink in order to put the ends where the shunt goes and stuff like that, and onto the actual inverter itself. This is a butt connector crimper or a wire cutter. This is a wire stripper, which is very old and very used. I've had this thing for like 6 years since I was a mechanic. It still does the job, but not very well. And then I'm not sure if I'm gonna need this, but I have some heat shrink and some electrical tape. But that's pretty much what we need. If anything else pops up along the way, I'll let you know. All right, so the first step is going to be understanding this harness to make sure we don't wire stuff incorrectly. My assumption is, because this is an OEM harness from a Sur Ron Light B, is that the circuit breaker goes between these two connections, and that would mean that the spot on this corner is the power. But we have a multimeter, so we're going to test this, that way we don't fry anything. So first thing we're going to do, so we're going to turn this thing on. First we're going to check for resistance. So what we're going to do is, so now that we're checking for resistance, we have it set on the resistance ohm scale. We're going to do this. Touch those two together, and you can see that there's a little bit of resistance. That's just the resistance in the circuit. So that's how we're going to see, we're going to touch two ends of the wire to make sure that that's where it goes, because you kind of can't see in this connector, so it's kind of hidden. So what I'm going to do is touch the one that I think is the power, and then touch the end of that wire. And if it shows no resistance, which it shows a slight bit of resistance, so that means that that wire is going to the breaker. And then I'm going to check the other one and all the way to the end of the ground circuit, and again that one shows little resistance. So I know the black wire at the end of this is the ground wire, and I know that this wire on the bottom left is the one for the circuit breaker. So that's very important. I want to make sure you don't mess that up. I'm going to change this to check my battery to see how much voltage is at. This is a way you can test it. So we're going to go to this DC voltage under 200. That way we can test it on the battery. And assuming this is correct, the one on the bottom right is the positive, and this one is the negative. So we are currently measuring 65 volts because this thing is fully charged. Even though it's a 60 volt battery, it's going to run slightly above 60 volts. So that means when I'm looking at this from my end, on the right is the positive, on the left is the negative. That's like the most important thing you can know. Positive, negative, you do it backwards, you're going to fry some stuff. So now that we know this is the positive end of the actual circuit, I'm going to put this on here, and it matters which way it goes in. I think load should be coming in from the top. Put this thing in place and tighten it down. That way we know we have a protected circuit. If anything goes wrong, this thing will trip and save us from messing anything up. All right, that's on there. That's nice and safe. That would be an open circuit. That's off, so we're going to leave that on like that. That's easy enough. So our circuit is protected. If I do something wrong, touch something I'm not supposed to, at least that way we know I'm not going to fry anything. So our next step is something I don't really look forward to doing, but because we have a shunt in here, we're going to have to cut this negative wire and put this in between. So that's not a fun thing to do, but we have to do it. So let's just cut it right here. We'll do it in line with that circuit breaker. I'm going to use this. Ooh, that's pretty big. That's a diesel wire. Okay, that wire is now cut, and that is the negative side. So we also need to strip the end of this wire, which these are not quite the right size wire strippers for this, but it'll do the job. The only thing that stinks about this is I'm kind of destroying a nice, perfectly good Sur Ron harness. We have our chopped up Sur Ron harness now. This is the ground side of the circuit, and the ground side of the circuit needs this to go in between it, which is the shunt, which is going to connect to our little screen. I need to put lugs on either end of this. We're going to take this off to see what size lugs we have to work with here. And it fits around there really well. And that also fits in there really well. So this is our lug we're going to do. We're going to use our crimper, which according to this is an 8. The best way I found to do this is kind of just put this in here. Give it like a half squeeze to kind of hold it in place. And then we're going to put this in there. And then we give it a good crimp. Yeah. Now we have a nice solid connection on there. And we're going to take some heat shrink. I'm going to take this blowtorch, which is a little overkill, but all right, that's one end of that circuit done. I'm going to put that on the side here. Good save. All right. Do the same thing with another one of those crimps, which is right here. There you go. That one is officially crimped on there as well. Grab another piece of heat shrink. So now we have the two ends of our negative harness. We have this end, which is going to be the end that goes to the inverter, and this end, which goes to the battery. And you can see we have the negative side. This is going to connect to our shunt. This is going to connect to the positive side. This is the circuit breaker. And we're going to move on to the next step here. All right, now that we have the two sides of this harness ready, we're going to put them together. So easier step is going to be to put this one into the circuit breaker. So what we're going to do is we're going to put it in the slot, and then I'm going to grab my screwdriver, tighten it down. You want to make sure too that you're actually screwing down to the metal part. If you're screwing down to the heat shrink or the insulation, it's not going to make a good contact. So you got to make sure that's correct. And we are connected on the positive side. The breaker's off right now, but if we wanted to connect it, we just do that. Now it's green, good to go. Red shuts our power circuit down immediately. So that's a nice feature. Next, I'll move these to the side. Next thing we're going to do is hook up our shunt, which we need to look at our manual to make sure this is going the right way. But I don't know if it matters. No, it doesn't really matter which way. We just need to wire the part afterwards the same way. So we're going to put this wire here. I'm going to do that one hand tight. I'm going to move this so you have a better view. And then this next one, the same thing on the other side of this circuit. And this shunt isn't really necessary, but it's used to monitor the voltage and kind of give you an idea of what the circuit's doing. And for demonstration purposes of this video, it's important to be able to see how the voltage is moving and stuff like that. So definitely wanted it in this case. Now we're going to get these nice and tight. In this case, it's a 14 millimeter, but if you have a different shunt, it very much could be different. That one's tight. That one's tight. So now this is our modified Sur Ron Light B harness in order to accept an inverter. It's only one thing we need to do is we need to do the final wires for this shunt, but if we were to hook this up right now to the inverter, it would power something. So I might actually test that out. But first, next step is to get these two sides to actually hook up to the inverter, which, as you can see, these lugs are not big enough to fit over the studs on this. So yeah, we need to just put new lugs on them. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to cut these ends off and put new lugs on them that fit over the studs of our inverter. Look at that. I have 2 more lugs left, so that's perfect. We just have to make sure those fit over our studs, which they do. All right, so we're going to crimp these on. Ugh. Perfect. There we go. Perfect. And we're going to heat shrink both of these up. So there is our harness. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of test it out. Make sure everything works as it should. So I want to put some heat shrink on the end of the positive terminal, just so that way that doesn't end up touching anything, because we're just going to do a little quick bench test of everything. So, all right, we're officially plugged in. I'm going to turn my multimeter on. I'm going to check right here, make sure we have power and ground, which right there we have 65 volts currently. So I'm going to make sure right here, also 65 volts, also 65 volts. So we have a good ground all the way on our ground circuit. I'm going to put this on here just because I really don't want those two on the end touching. That'd be really bad. We're going to flip this. Actually, I'm going to make sure we don't have power on the end. So now we don't have power on the other side of the breaker, so we're going to trip this. Now we have power. And then we'll make sure we have power on the end, which we do. I'm going to unplug this again just to make it nice and safe. So our harness is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. So now it's time for us to connect it to the actual inverter. Like that. So everything is in order. The only thing I don't have connected right now is my shunt. We're going to save that for last. We're just going to do a quick test. We're going to plug this in. We're officially connected everything. So turn the power on. Power does nothing right now. And then I'm going to switch the breaker on. And we have power. We're at 65 volts. You can hear the fan running. Wow, that thing's ripping. So there we go. The fan is running. We're at 65 volts. Let's find something to plug in. First thing I found to plug in might be a little bit overkill, but let's test it. Actually, does it say how many watts this thing uses? Uses 10 amps at 120 volts. I should still be okay. Let's see it. Look at that. We have a Sur Ron Light B battery powering a 60 volt inverter with a Sawzall. It's So that's pretty cool. Yeah, and this is everything in the package right here. So you can buy a pack out and anything like that and put it right into there. All you have to do is get a Sur Ron Lite BX harness, modify it a little bit, put a circuit breaker in there. That way the circuit's nice and safe. I have a shunt, which we're going to wire up next just to make sure we can kind of see what's happening. It's working perfectly. This is actually really cool. Even without the shunt, you actually have something on the battery on a Sur Ron that tells you how much you have left. So the shunt might not be 100% necessary. The only thing is you'd have to find a way to charge it. I have the wall charger. So you could just charge a Sur Ron battery and then use it till you run out. That's pretty cool. It's funny that it charges like I'm running off a Sur Ron with the Sawzall. That's really cool. Maybe I'm just nerding out on this stuff, but yeah. We have a Sur Ron Lite BX 60 volt battery with a circuit breaker in between, a Sur Ron harness, and a 60 volt inverter. Converting that 60 volts into a usable 110 for anything like a Sawzall or any other accessories like a diesel heater that would work on that. And this is a pretty high capacity battery, so you should be able to use quite a bit of power and get quite a bit of life out of that. So let's shut this thing off. I'm gonna unplug it too just to be safe. So the nice thing is that say you need to use your Sur Ron to ride your e-bike, all you do is unplug it and take it on your way. And this is still just one thing. It's easily quick connect, disconnect. And all you need is something to store this. This is your power station. This is really cool. Anyone who has an e-bike battery just lying around, you can have this set up and you have power. Say you lose power, say you're going on a trip somewhere where you don't have power, you have an extra battery. That's all you need, which is really cool. This inverter is about $200. The shunt's $10. I think the circuit breaker was another $12. And the wiring harness, I think, was $70, which is kind of one of the more expensive things. But for the most part, that's pretty much it. That'll get you started. But let's get the shunt going so that way I can see how that'll work. All right, because I bought this very cheap shunt, I have to make my own wiring harness, which kind of stinks. This is it. We're going to do that. That way we can kind of test it out, make sure everything works right. All right, so close up is we have these wires running. This is a specific way they have to run based on the harness. Again, every shunt is different, but one wire runs to the negative side, one wire runs to this, one wire runs to this, one wire runs to the positive side of the battery, which I have in the actual circuit breaker. And that is all so that we can power this thing here, which is a shunt, and it's going to tell us what everything does. So let's give it a test. All right, we have lights. Voltage, current, 0. We're going to do this. That's going to turn that on. You can see a little bit of flow occurred. And now, turn the inverter on. Something's happening. But now you can see we are drawing 17.8 watts from our Sur Ron Lite B battery. All right, so here is everything that we have. We have the Sur Ron Lite B battery currently at 100%. We have the wires going to a circuit breaker, to a shunt on the negative side, and then to a 60 volt inverter. But as you can see right now, just from the inverter being on, we're using about 0.21 amps, about 14 watts of energy. Let's see what this button does. Oh, it just turns the backlight off. But yeah, that's currently what's happening. We have the inverter is on, 66 volts. See at the beginning, we're going to plug in our little Sawzall for a test. So to explain this circuit, basically what we have the power coming from this plug going into the circuit breaker. Whether this is switched on or off, shuts the power entirely to the inverter. Power from the circuit breaker goes in to the inverter. Our negative comes out of the battery, goes to the shunt, which these wires are specific to the shunt in order to kind of determine how much amps is going through the actual circuit. And then from the other side of the shunt, going to the actual inverter. So this is actually a really simple circuit. It's not that complicated. The average person probably could figure this out. It's not too hard, and it's a really easy way to get power to your Sur Ron Lite B. So I'm going to cut this power and show you guys. But this is all the space that this takes up, besides the battery. if you were to wire this a little bit better and package it up better, you can see how that's something easily you could just tuck away. And if, say, you lost power, grab your e-bike battery out of the garage or the basement, wherever you keep it, and plug it in. And then you have 4 electrical outlets to power whatever you need. And this is a pretty good power station. It should last quite a while. It says we are currently using about 14 watts. Our plug in our Sawzall, which has a pretty heavy draw. So we're going to find out what that is. Oh, here. Sawzall goes in. So it's using about, I think it's 600 watts at some times. Let's check that again. About 700 watts or so coming from the Sawzall. All right, everybody, I hope you found this video informative, and maybe if you have a e-bike battery lying around in your house, you might want to turn it into a power station. You might want to use that unharnessed energy because power stations can be expensive. And if you just build something like this, you have power pretty much anywhere you need to go. It's pretty simple, especially the inverter package. This weighs about 35 pounds, so it's pretty heavy, but the rest of it is pretty lightweight as well. You could build a container for this. You could put it into like a Milwaukee pack out, and then you could have this thing mobile. That's how you make a power station out of a Sur Ron Light BX battery. This is a 60 volt battery, so we have a 60 volt inverter. Honestly, most e-bikes, especially the smaller ones, will have a 48 volt battery. A 48 volt inverter is what you would need for them. They are very much easier to find than a 60 volt inverter. I had a hard time finding one of these and didn't have much to choose from. So this thing's very Chinese, but clearly it's working so far. So you always want to get a pure sine wave inverter, never get a modified sine wave inverter. Those things can damage your electronics, so you want to make sure you get an inverter that's proper for what you need. This is pretty cool. This worked out really well. I did not do this before the video. This is an entirely proof of concept while I was working on it, so glad it worked out, or else I would have just wasted my day making a power station that didn't do anything, that didn't power anything. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Please leave a like if you learned something, and if you want to subscribe, we're going to make more videos about DIY, camping, e-bikes, all kinds of things that I'm into. This is something I've been thinking about for a while, especially since I use a power station for camping to power my diesel heater. But say I was going camping with my Sur Ron and I brought both my batteries, I could use my Sur Ron battery to power my diesel heater for the night. So this is really freaking cool. Yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this, and till next time.